The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is an absolutely wonderful game. My friends and I love it. But there are a few things in the game that bring the fun levels down a bit. Some of the issues aren't as big as others, but all of them really need addressing before the Texas Chainsaw Massacre can become the best that it can be. I'll be discussing some of the major pain points of the game, how they can be improved, and how the fun levels can be increased. I'll be primarily focusing on quality of life and general changes rather than balance, as that can be a whole video of its own. First, I need to talk briefly about the game structure and how the game has a few phases that matches go through. There are 3 primary phases, which are split based on how far the victims have progressed. While the victims are still in the basement, the game is in Phase 1, the family setup phase. Technically, there is a Phase 0, the opening phase, while Grandpa is still asleep, and either team waking him up progresses the game to Phase 1, but this phase usually lasts about a minute, if not less. If the victims escape the basement before Grandpa is awoken, then he immediately awakes as the match progresses into Phase 2, the inner portion. Within the inner portion are 4 exits to the outside, with the family house being a small exception with the windows, a fuse box, a pressure valve, and the fuses and valves to operate them scattered all about. Grandpa himself exists in the inner portion. Once the victims breach one of the 4 exits or place the correct object into the correct objective, the game progresses into Phase 3, the escape. With one of the exits open or a victim breached into the outer portions, the family must be more aggressive and take risks to stop the victims from breaching any holes in their defense. Then finally, victims either die or escape and the game ends. Now with the phases explained, let's get right into the thick of it with some simple yet majorly impactful points that deal with the family setup phase, namely the lack of one in about 70% of games. Right now, the victims start a little bit before the family. This isn't too much of a problem at first, until you realize how much they get. They can actually wake up Grandpa, effectively ending the family setup phase before the family players have even finished their opening cutscene. Before they even have control of their characters, the victims can end the family setup phase. While I hear you piping up in the back, family just needs to get good at that point. When one side has the ability to progress before the opposite team can even control their character, there is no counterplay, no gameplay for one side. Lack of control over things leads to a lack of fun. And I also hear the person who analyzes the opening phase of the game and realize that while victims gain a small head start, it is done so on ropes. Ropes that must be wiggled out of, and can be wiggled out of in about 5 seconds or less. This sequence, frankly, does a bad job of conveying to the victim players, in my opinion, that struggling here means absolutely nothing and actually should be done in order for you to know where your allies are, as the family are still stuck watching a 23-second cutscene before they get to play. This is not necessarily a problem. What the problems here are is that, for one, the amount of time they get before the family can control their characters and how fast they can break out of those ropes at the beginning, and also that struggling on the ropes adds to Grandpa's wake-up. These things make the opening moments of a match so unfun, it's not even funny anymore to see Leland walking around behind Leatherface while he's still in his opening cutscene, only to smack him as soon as he has control of his character. Victims need to start about 3 seconds later than they currently do, and victims struggling off the ropes certainly should not add to Grandpa's wake-up. The opening phase needs to, at the very least, last until every player has control of their characters. Being able to skip the opening phase while half the players haven't even started yet means that the family has to do their setup without knowing whether a door has opened and the game progressed to Phase 2. Again, this is not a huge problem and could be a powerful strategy for victims, waking up Grandpa purposefully by making a lot of noise rather than opening a door to throw the family off. But not while the family literally hasn't even started the game yet. This consistent ability to completely skip the family setup phase comes to a head when you consider some of the other problems the game has when it comes to the beginning of any match, like the car battery. The car battery, unlike the generator, does not start on and must be manually turned on, despite there being a shot in the opening cutscene of a family member turning it on. That means that one of the family members, with the literal 0 seconds they have for setup, needs to move all the way to the car, wherever it may be, should they not start beside it, and waste themselves for about 20 to 30 seconds to turn it on, simply so the survivors can't just walk out unopposed. This wouldn't be too much of a problem if one of the family members actually started near the car reliably, which leads to another change the game needs. Spawn choice. Non-Leatherface family members should be able to choose their start location from a small list of possibilities. This will ensure that, despite any lack of setup phase, the family can still at least be in position and have a chance to stop the victims from reaching phase 2 in literal seconds. This will also ensure that metagaming stays at a fine medium, with victims not being able to know where a family member is based simply on who they are and where they start. It seems small, but this is very healthy and necessary for the game to succeed. Then, before we move past the family setup phase, I still need to mention the Grandpa wake-up cutscene. This is extremely intrusive and causes a lot of problems for everybody when this occurs. Suddenly losing control of your character is not conducive to a fun time, especially since performed actions are held during the cutscene. It gives some people advantages while hindering others, and is frankly just a loose cannon that needs to be tied down. The cutscene and loss of control of your character needs to be removed and replaced with a simple yet powerfully noticeable HUD asset, which, to be honest, all need to be more present on the screen, particularly the basement exit opened notification, which tends to get missed. While those simple changes will make the game so much more palatable and fun during the opening moments, we now need to zoom ahead to the end of the match, which frankly isn't too much later when players know what they're doing. One particular exit in 2 of the maps have one less security measure than, well, every other exit in the game. This makes them the most viable and gone-after exits. Despite knowing this ahead of time, the knowledge does not change the effectiveness of these exits, as they can be breached in mere seconds. I'm speaking in particular about the front road exit in Family House and gas station exit in Gas Station. Both of these exits feature one less security measure each in the form of no lock being present to exit the front road in Family House and no electricity to shut off to exit the front door in Gas Station. These exits are a liability, and knowing to watch them just makes you unable to do anything else and have fun playing and doing what you're supposed to do as the family. Namely because Connie exists. None of this would be this much of a problem if Connie's focus ability didn't work like it does. The character is able to explode locks, and there is little to nothing a family member can do about it. If she touches a door, the lock is busted. That's busted. This character's ability needs some nerfing, especially in comparison to the other abilities available to the victims. It's god tier, and she needs a huge detriment or for that ability to be changed entirely, because it using her stamina is not enough. A lock on a door is a universal obstacle that the victims need to overcome, and is a key portion of the gameplay. This is the major gameplay hurdle. This is how the family holds things down, by watching locks and making sure none get picked. This is how the victims progress, by picking locks and breaching areas. You have one character that can take the most fundamental portion of the gameplay and say, "Nah, I don't want to do that." This is game breaking, and I do not exaggerate that in the slightest. This would be like Dead by Daylight having a character that can instantly power a generator. It's a complete disregard for the actual gameplay goals and a willful ignorance to adhere to game rules. The whole game is about opening locks. Why would she be able to say, "I don't want to play the game"? Having one character that can instantly progress makes one team reliant on them and the other team fearful and anxietous about them. It's simply not a fun experience for anyone besides Connie. Now I hear you ask, how do you fix something that ignores gameplay? You remove it, as it doesn't belong. Give her a different ability, like to be able to move without making noise and triggering Gramps for a short time. Heck, even just make the ability cause her to not break lockpicks, and then she could just cram the lock without care. Even that would be better than instantly exploding them. What should be in the game, in place of her lost ability to blow open a lock, is an item that can do that, located only in the basement and with only one per match. Make it like Leatherface's hammer, to smash open a lock, and maybe a perk to allow one extra use out of it at level 3. This would be so beyond healthy for the game, as Connie wouldn't be required on your team at high levels of play, and any composition of victims have the means to make a great escape. Variety of choice leads to a fun gaming experience. Then we have one more issue involving victim power in games. Endgame. This game does not currently have what would be referred to as an endgame collapse, where the end of a match is ushered in by a force of some kind. While there is the constantly deteriorating health of the victims, they can heal through it, or worse, hack through it. With the health timer circumvented, victims control family members or even hold them hostage in a game. With the only escape being to quit and forfeit your own EXP gains, there really isn't an upside to this particular problem. There needs to be a force that brings about the end of a game without relying on the health of a victim. A baked-in timer, if you will, that no match may exceed X amount of time. Otherwise, hackers have a lot of power. Players often don't mind running into hackers. But when the hacker has power over the rewards another player might receive from a match, it can get very frustrating and suck the fun out of any game. Okay, now that the big things are out of the way, let's discuss one more section the game needs improvement on. Loadouts and builds. Customization and builds are a large part of games like these, and this one's no exception. With 3 perk slots, 1 grandpa perk slot, and a customizable, slightly, ability, builds in this game have the potential to be extremely diverse and impactful. The only major issue is that your skill tree setup is completely separated from your loadouts, of which you can save 5. But you only get 1 skill tree setup. This means that any loadout you make has to use the same skill tree setup as the previous. With no ability to diversify the tree setup between loadouts, the loadouts are all similar and built out of the same things. This makes them next to useless, and this needs to be changed. Skill tree choices should be tied to your loadout, allowing you to have a different tree build for a different loadout, actually creating the opportunity for players to use the loadouts as they were probably intended, to change your style of play based on choices. If I have a blood harvesting cook and another player is a blood harvesting sissy, then one of us might want to not be doing the same job as the other player. One of us might want to switch to doing a savagery build in that moment. But oh noes, the skill tree has to be respec'd and redistributed completely in the moment just to make another build, literally making the loadouts useless. If I spend points in a character's skill tree making a build, I should be able to make another tree build with the same points. Then there's one more thing about the skill tree that needs to change. Random perks. There should not be, within a skill tree, randomized slots such as these. A player will want a specific perk out of this slot in order to make whatever build they are intending to, which will cause the player to need to respec the tree to get the random perk and gamble on the one they want, respec when they don't get it, and waste more time until they get the build they want. This is pointless, a waste of player time, and frankly insulting to me as a player to make me respec infinitely to chance out a random perk. Absolutely unfun. These need to be a slot in which you get to choose the perk you want out of a list made up of all the perks that are currently random. That about sums up the skill trees. Before I move on to another big topic, I need to take a moment to question the design choice behind sound notifications not appearing for you if you were not looking in the direction of its origin when it was made. Why? What is the purpose of this feature? All it does is disallow players from receiving crucial information for arguably arbitrary reasons. Sound cues should show up regardless. But moving on. Now, while I plan on making a video strictly about balance, I feel it necessary to talk about a small issue with one of the perks in particular. There is one perk that the victims have that lets them deal up to 4 whole levels worth of damage to Grandpa. Now, I'm going to get a little mathy here. That's a 400 blood loss for the cost of 1 perk and 5 seconds of gameplay action. Considering that the best blood harvesting build on Cook can gather 42 per bucket with a maximum capacity of 186, and that the blood buckets don't refill completely for a whole 4 minutes, means the math is off and that the victim has more than double the power of the family. It takes that cook 4 full blood buckets, 16 seconds of gathering, and over a minute of walking around just to put 160 blood into Grandpa. Then you must find other buckets, resulting in 2.5 trips for over 400 blood over the course of 5 minutes of gameplay. All of this must be done between scream intervals with 20 whole seconds of not being able to feed him blood again. Meanwhile, it takes 8 seconds of gathering from an unlimited resource, a short jaunt up to Grandpa, and the press of a button to make Grandpa lose 400 blood and be unfeedable for around 30 seconds. Now, mind you, that takes 1 out of the 4 victims to do that. This difference in numbers is egregious at best, and this needs some changes very, very soon before the gameplay aspect of feeding Grandpa is completely forsaken by the players. If everyone can delete minutes worth of work in seconds, then there's no point in trying to begin with. Now, I understand the development team say that they want to focus on fun more than balance, but there is nothing more unfun than a lack of counterplay. Then, there's one final pain point to the game at the moment, and it has to do with the lobbies. And no, I'm not talking about the obvious bugs in the lobby system or even the fact that leaving a game causes the party to disband and need to be recreated, all because you didn't want to watch Sunny hide in the basement for 15 minutes. No, I'm actually talking about leavers. People who join lobbies and leave them for whatever reason or another. These people need to have a timer put on themselves to be unable to queue up for another match immediately after leaving one. There should be no penalty for doing it once or twice, as it may just be connection issues, but do it too much and the player needs to be penalized for causing every other player to have to wait longer because they didn't get their character or something. The lack of penalty actually incentivizes players to leave a match they don't like the look of. Hooey! That was bigger than I thought it would be. This game frankly needs a lot of TLC before it's truly ready to be the amazing game it has clearly got the capacity to be. In conclusion, the game needs these changes. Lobby lever penalties. Skill tree choices tied to loadouts. Random perks need to become perk choices. The Grandpa Killer perk needs to be weakened. Connie's ability needs to change. A forced endgame needs to exist. The car battery needs to start on. Family members need to choose their starting location. Front road exits need one extra layer of security. Victim struggling should not add to Grandpa's wake-up timer. And Grandpa waking up should not interrupt gameplay. And the victims should start about 3 seconds later than they do now. Now, a lot of this is simple quality of life and general fixes, as I said, and I plan on making another video talking about how to balance certain aspects of the game. I want to see this game succeed. I really like its design, and I think it could be an absolute titan in the gaming world. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and thanks for watching.